Welcome to the Secret Underground Laboratory Recovery and Salvage, where rude mechanicals do magic. Hello, I'm Bronze Age, Director of the Secret Underground Laboratory Recovery and Salvage, and today I'm going to be rewiring a real chandelier. Now I call this a real chandelier because this style, with flowers on the ends of wires, welded or soldered to the arms, was the inspiration for uncounted thousands of reproductions that were imported in the United States in the 1950s. Now, the reproductions were made of steel. The arms were steel tubes. The flowers were stamped from sheet metal. And this is all brass. These are brass pieces, the tubes, the flowers, the wires, and everything, all made of brass. A friend once came to the lab. He was very excited because he had found a violin at a pawn shop. When he looked through the F-holes on the inside of the case, he saw the writing Stradivarius. And his question was, did I think it was real? And my answer, of course, was, well, it's a real violin. Now, people familiar with violins know that in the late 40s into the 50s, and I don't know exactly when it stopped, violin makers in Germany would stamp Stradivarius on the inside of their violins. You know, if you're going to make violins, I guess you could name your violin company anything you want it to be. What I'm going to do here is solder all the new wires to the old wires and use the old wires to pull the new wires through the arm. And I'm going to do them all at the same time, then turn it back over and pull them all at the same time. Now, before I turn it over, I give each of these connections a good strong tug, because it's silly to go through all this work and then have one pull loose halfway through the pipe. Always use these soft pads, which are held on with magnets, so I can clamp the pipe in the vise without worrying about bending it or even marking it. Put this piece on first because it's easier to get it fastened down before the wires pull through. And all threaded connections in the lab are sealed with this blue thread sealer. Much easier and much more efficient than lock washers. And here we see something interesting. This curly Q wire here indicates that the old sockets, they wired them up and then turned them down like that. Never a good practice. Try to avoid that under all circumstances. Now a little more blue goo on the socket itself. And this ensures that even though physically it's not possible to get something this lightweight tight on these threads, it won't come loose while someone is changing a bulb or something like that. Slight tweak, and that's all it needs to be. Now, I'm going to give the same short sermon that I give every time I'm wiring a light, basically of any kind. You'll see we've got a brass screw here and a silver screw, and that's important. And the wire itself, all this duplex wiring that's sold for use in lighting, one side has ridges on the insulation, one side is smooth. And the reason for that is so you know which wire goes where. The smooth wire will go underneath the brass colored screw, and the ridge wire will go under the silver screw. Now, the National Electrical Code says that multi-stranded wires should never be put under a screw terminal. And so, to take care of that problem, I'm going to tin the wires. And that basically means putting a drop of solder on the tip of each one, turns that multi-strand wire into a single strand. And when it's put underneath the screw, it will stay tight. The multi-strands under a screw terminal will just simply splay out and get loose, get hot, and nothing good happens if electrical connections get hot. Now when I wrap them around the screw, it's always clockwise, so that when I tighten it down, it will draw the wire under the screw instead of pushing it out. Now it's time to run the trunk wire, and I prefer to use cord sets for a couple reasons. The main one is because the wire costs about the same per foot as if it came off of a roll. And in this case, it's going to go to a dealer who's going to put it on display, and having a plug already on the end of the wire makes life a lot easier for everybody. The cord sets come with the tips pre-tinned, and I'll be cutting those off when I make the main connection, but it'll make it a little bit easier to grab it down at the bottom end of the lamp. But they also can get snagged pushing through the pipe. So I take a small piece of shrink tubing, which is a peculiar plastic, which shrinks when it gets hot. Heat it up, it draws up tight like that, and I can feed it down the pipe with much less effort. And down here at the bottom end, I've got to get this through this hole that's been ground in the pipe. Not the way I would have done it, but nothing wrong with it. At least not enough to make me want to take it apart and do it the way I usually do. Now I'm ready to make the first major connection. I trimmed all the wires to as short as I possibly can because I don't have a lot of room inside here after it's made. And then I'm going to solder it together. All connections in the Secret Underground Laboratory are soldered. Do not use wire nuts. Certainly don't just twist the wire and wrap it up in tape. A solder connection like this is the only way to ensure that you've got a good solid connection that's going to last many, many years. Now with both connections made, slip some more of this shrink tubing over it. And true to its name, it shrinks. And what I like to do is cut another piece, fold it down over it, and hit it one more time. You may have noticed that some of the sockets are not pointing all in the same direction, and the arms aren't all pointed the same way either. And that's basically because of the way these things are shipped. Someone in a warehouse in France or Italy or wherever grabs this, throws it into a box of peanuts, puts it on a stack of boxes with other chandeliers in it, and the chandeliers at the bottom of the stack usually don't come out too well. And it's such a common problem that I've made this jig for straightening them out in the least amount of time. And that starts with making sure that it's centered underneath my rail trolley. Now I get the plumb bob centered over this hole as close as practically possible. And then put the chandelier in the hole. Hang it from this hook and adjust it so that it is swinging free. And I'll have a good way to judge and compare each arm. And what you do is you find one that's relatively straight, set this little block here, and then take all the others and bend them until they match with the height and the socket straight up in the air. And I think that's going to do. Well, this is Bronze Age for the Secret Underground Laboratory Recovery and Salvage, and thank you for sticking through with this video with me. Appreciate a like and subscribe, and again, thank you for watching.